If your spouse has passed away during the immigration process, first of all, I want to say I am so sorry. This has to be a very stressful time for you, not only because you're losing your partner, but also because there's the other implication on your immigration status. In this video, what I want to do is show you the path forward, and that although it's a very difficult time, what I hope is that by the time this video is done, you have some peace of mind and see that this is not impossible and instead is very doable. Hi, I'm immigration attorney Hillary Walsh, and I'm the owner of New Frontier Immigration Law, and we help immigrants live free here in the United States. So whether you're in your home country right now and we're planning on doing the petition process through your spouse, or if you're already in the United States, we can help you. And this video is going to show you kind of what the process would be if you wanted our help or if you want to go it on your own. First of all, this video is really going to be for two separate types of people. One is for someone who was married to a lawful permanent resident and that partner, that spouse has passed away. And we're going to talk about that first. The second part of this video is going to teach you about if you were married to a US citizen and your US citizen spouse has passed away. So let's start if you were married to a lawful permanent resident. Now, if your spouse was a lawful permanent resident at the time that he or she passed away, even if they were in the naturalization process, if they were still technically a lawful permanent resident, what your options are a little bit more limited. And you would need to look into something like an I-360 VAWA self-petition, where you show that you experienced extreme cruelty from your spouse or battery from your spouse at any time during your relationship. Obviously, this is probably not like a really positive thing for you to go through and experience right now. And the idea of having to talk about the difficult times of your marriage right as your spouse is dying, I recognize is probably a very complicated set of emotions to deal with. But what I really want to drive home is that this is one of your options under the law. Another option is if your spouse has, and that's very specific, if your spouse had not filed a petition for you. So if your lawful permanent resident spouse has never filed a petition for you, versus if a lawful permanent resident spouse had filed a petition for you and it was either still pending or it had already been approved, that's a different scenario. What I'm talking about is you're married to a lawful permanent resident. He or she has never filed any paperwork on your behalf, and now they have passed away. One option you have, and it is a very limited option, is to file an I-360 through VAWA. You do have a deadline for filing this, and that is within 2 years of your lawful permanent resident spouse's passing away. And so that's kind of one of your options. By contrast, if your lawful permanent resident spouse has filed a petition for you and it just hadn't been approved yet, then you have more options available to you. You can do things like humanitarian reinstatement, which is a whole process. And you can also, if you're living in the United States in particular, you can also seek relief under something called Section 204L. And this is for surviving relatives. So if you were a beneficiary, regardless of whether they were a US citizen or a lawful permanent resident, as long as they have filed a petition for you and it's still pending, or perhaps it's already been approved and just the green card process has not, been completed, you can seek relief, essentially seek options under humanitarian reinstatement or what's called Section 204L. And so those are two options for you, whether you have the petition still pending or whether it's been approved and the green card process just hasn't been completed for you. The next part of this video I want to talk to you about is if your spouse is a US citizen, you kind of have a much easier pathway forward if your spouse was a US citizen. Specifically, even if they hadn't filed for you, you can just file an I-360. You don't have to show, like in the first part of this video when I was describing how you would have to show you experienced extreme cruelty from your lawful permanent resident spouse if they had never filed a petition for you. By contrast, if they're a US citizen, all you have to do is just file the I-360. You don't have to show that you experienced any extreme cruelty or battery from your deceased U.S. citizen spouse. You just file the I-360. It's interesting when you look at the form, they're the exact same form. For VAWA, if you have a lawful permanent resident spouse who never filed for you, that's a VAWA I-360 petition, but you just fill out different sections on the form itself. Where if your U.S. citizen spouse never filed a petition for you, you fill out the I-360, but you don't have to fill out the section that shows, or you don't have to provide any proof that shows that you were subject to extreme cruelty or battery from your U.S. citizen spouse. You just have to show that you were legally married and that your spouse was a U.S. citizen, and that they have now passed away. And you usually include like the death certificate for that component. So marriage certificate, death certificate, and like a copy of their passport or their birth certificate showing they were born in the U.S. And that's really the only evidence you have to provide for your U.S. citizen spouse, even if they never petitioned for you to begin with. Now, some people's spouses have petitioned for them. Their U.S. citizen spouse petitioned for them, and then they passed away. What happens next? And the answer to that is it will automatically convert to an I-360. You just let USCIS know, like send a letter to USCIS with the death certificate. And you can say, I want to bring to your attention that I filed this I-130. My spouse filed this I-130 for me. Here's the receipt notice. Here's a photocopy of the receipt. I want to let you know that although this hasn't been approved yet, I would like for you to convert this to an I-360 widow petition or widower petition because my spouse has now passed away, and I'm including a photocopy of the death certificate to show this. And then once USCIS starts to process it, it will automatically get converted to an I-360. You won't increase the processing time. You don't have to start over or anything like that. USCIS will do that for you automatically. Now, if your U.S. citizen spouse filed the I-360 for you, the I-130 for you, the petition for your green card, that initial petition, but they've since passed away, and let's say it was approved. Let's say the I-130 was approved, and now all you had to do was complete the process. Again, the same rules apply where you're not going to need for your I-485 for the green card process. If you were married to a U.S. citizen, you're filing this within the 2 years of the death, the process is going to be very simple. And if anything, it will be simplified because of not needing to have a sponsor and things like that. Where things will get complicated is if you're out of the country. If you're out of the country and your spouse has passed away while the petition was pending and those sorts of things, sometimes you will need, there are very special cases where you'll need what's called a substitute sponsor. And this is a very specific set of rules on who can be a substitute sponsor. But in certain situations, you will need that. And it's important for you to not only do your research, but to work with an immigration lawyer who you feel like can help you. I'm going to end this here because overall, this whole process can become very complicated. It's like this kind of wild flow chart where it's like, if you're married to a U.S. citizen, then this. And if they filed an I-130 for you and it's still pending, then you do this. But if they filed it for you and it's been approved, then you do this, and so on if you are married to a lawful permanent resident. So I want to end here and say that going through this process can be complicated. It's got to be very challenging emotionally. Please reach out to New Frontier Immigration Law. You can send us a message. You can reach out to us if you're listening to this on the podcast. And I hope that you get the peace and the comfort and the freedom that you so absolutely deserve. And again, my very sincere condolences for the loss of your spouse.